piece of advice you'd have for folks that want to come work at Google?
To get a Google, you really have to know this stuff, like really know it. Just make sure you know your craft, like know it really well, and also just like try to reach out. Like I would say a lot of the people keep an open mind. When I say an open mind, like don't feel pigeonholed into something because it's what like your parents want you to do or it's what like your teachers are pushing you towards. Like try to think for yourself.
All right, Kesaan, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on. We've been planning it for a little while,
Indeed.
Perfect. So let's begin with tell us where you live currently, who you work for, and what problems you're trying to solve these days.
Where I live. So I actually moved to Austin, Texas in April of last year. Been here about a year, loving it. Austin is awesome. I moved back to Google a week ago. So
nice.
Back at Google after I was there before for like 7.5 years. I guess we'll get to that later. And right now I'm working on Google Cloud Platform, specifically capacity management. So like predicting machine usage, making sure we're adequately scaled for VMs for our customers, and we don't have like stock hosts, things along those lines.
Exciting. And where are you originally from?
Barbados. Yeah.
And you're from Barbados, so happy to say that you're our first guest from Barbados. So shout out to you.
Oh, thank you.
And everyone at home. Good.
Hopefully not the
so,
last.
No, definitely. I'm gonna use you as the first node to find more and more people. So tell us why you chose to work at Google. You just left Stripe and you sort of came back to Google. What were some of your motivations and what sort of excites you about working at Google?
So I love Google. I joined it a year after being out of college. I was there for 7.5 years. And the only reason I left is because I felt like if I didn't leave, I would never leave. And I wanted to see what the outside world was like. I've only ever worked before that at Amazon and Google, like humongous tech companies. Stripe is somewhat big as well, but I wanted to get a taste of the startup life, see how smaller companies iterate on processes, do their development, things along those lines. So that was why I left. And for coming back, it was a lot of personal stuff. With my fiance and myself are thinking more so about like having a family, like expanding along those lines. And Google is very supportive in terms of really good paternity benefits, helping out with like child rearing, all that kind of stuff. So that's why I decided to go back.
Very cool. Does Google have an office in Texas? They probably have a big office, right?
It does actually. So they have an Austin office, but I'm actually not situated there. I'm fully remote.
All right.
There's an Austin office. Yeah.
So what's interesting about your story is you've worked on campus because you've taken me there before. So you used to work directly on campus and now you work fully remote. Which one do you feel like? How do you feel about it now?
Personally, I don't think I could go back to an office, at least not at any meaningful capacity. Like, I'll go to meet my team for a week or two just to be in person, have that team interaction. But being able to get up in the morning and just like come to my desk and not have to worry about like getting into an office or coming home in the evening, like it takes a lot off of my shoulders at least. And I believe I'm way more productive being able to just like get to work without having to have all that superfluous stuff around work. And it helps me a lot.
Great. Yeah, I'll come to that story about when you're taking us to campus and I got a taste of what life was like on Google campus. So we do the show to encourage people from the Caribbean region and outside the Caribbean region now to pursue data-driven careers and more so anything in tech. So how do you sort of, you are, I would imagine, the pinnacle of software engineering, right? Extremely large scale at Google, and you had different experiences at Stripe and Amazon. What should people at home be thinking of in the Caribbean, let's say, in terms of the future of tech and what, how can they position themselves to best leverage what's being done in the world right now?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I have a good answer for anyone. I will say, for my personal opinion, like I don't think tech is going anywhere. Like big tech continues to grow, our lives are becoming more and more data driven, and to be in that field, like you are going to be on the cutting edge of helping shape like the future of where humanity is going. Pretty much, like we see the negative side effects in some of the things like election tampering and stuff like that. We also see positive side effects like helping fight climate change. And wherever you are in tech, I think you should try to find something that makes you excited. For me, like that's shifted over the years, but as long as you find something that like drives you and that you can enjoy doing, it will tremendously help in terms of keeping motivated to continue to work on it and avoiding like being burnt out on working on said stuff.
Yes, indeed. In the first part of the show, we usually like to dive into your career journey. So let's kind of start in high school. What were you like in high school? Were you an extremely disciplined student? Were you a slacker like myself? And the reason why I asked that is we do have some listeners that are in high school. And what interests me is you have seemed to know what you wanted to do most of your life. Like you did computer science, and at least you in school, you were fully sort of dedicated to that. So tell us about those high school days.
You might think you were a slacker, and I guess you've only known me from college, but like anyone who knew me before college and like early high school know that I was super slacker. In fact, I almost had to repeat a year of high school, and like, and if I tell anyone this, not, they probably wouldn't believe me, but I was like the worst. And then one year I took home a report card where I think in the Caribbean I was doing like, I forget the exact number of classes or courses, but I failed like exactly half of them. And my teachers had written a letter, was like, we're going to keep your son, or we think we'll keep your son back, all this stuff. And my mother was like, she was even angry. She was just like so overwhelmingly disappointed that like that was a changing point for me. Like she always like tried to impart the like importance of a good education to me and stuff like that. And I sort of got it, but like in high school, I really wasn't like particularly motivated. And I think the other thing was that like up to that point, it's sort of like trying to get a fish to climb a tree. Like I am very like mathematics. I was always good at. I would pass out like easy colors, but like languages and music, like I can't read a piece of music. I love music, can't read it, can't play an instrument, like I can't speak languages. I to this day I've been trying to learn Spanish for like 3 years in Duolingo. I'm still like terrible at Spanish. But like once I got the opportunity to start looking at computers in like I think fifth form, like fourth form or fifth form, like that's when I found my thing. Like other people in my class, like they just didn't get it, but like to me, the computers was like I understand it, and I understand how computers think and how they work even before I took computer classes, and like it just came so natural to me. Like nothing else does. Like chemistry, biology, like languages, nothing works, but computers I get, and that was like my turning point and helped me to like find something I love and like I could be good at and like focus towards working on it.
Interesting. So mom was disappointed, and I guess what did you sort of do after that? So you discovered computers in high school. Did you just have your own computer at home and you started programming then, or you were just you just kept playing around with it and then formally started programming in college?
So interestingly enough, I had a computer, but this computer was like, this is like towards the end of high school, but it was for my mother's work. So she wouldn't let me like go on it. It was just like this thing that was just like sitting there and I couldn't really touch for a while. Eventually she got a laptop so that I could use like the whole computer. Before that, it was just like this thing. But at school, we had like a computer science lab, and I actually spent like my lunchtime in a computer science lab, like just writing like the worst Pascal programs. Like it didn't do anything but like add simple numbers and just like learning the language. And back then, like there wasn't a Google, at least like, I didn't know of it as it is now, where you can like search all these cool things. Like you had to like read the manual that came with the programming interface, like and try to figure it out from that. And there was no like Stack Overflow or this stuff. So I just spend time like writing these trivial programs. But for me, it was so much fun. Like that was all my free time, and it was tremendously fun. Yeah.
Great. And what made you choose Florida Tech as a school. I think, at least for those listening, if I ask you to place Florida Tech on a map, people would probably just put it somewhere in Florida, and probably Miami or something.
They didn't know it's the actual middle of nowhere. They're correct.
Yes.
But yeah, it was, well, maybe like so after fifth form in the Caribbean, I went to Barbados Community College rather than going to sixth form at Horson's College.
Oh,
And
cool.
maybe the like second year, like the beginning of the second year, I was on track to get a Barbados scholarship. I had gotten all A's in all my classes thus far. And like, so my mom would not be able to afford to send me to college in the States. But having been on that track, we started to look at schools, stuff like that. And Florida Tech was, for one, it was near to Barbados. It's like a single flight from Florida to Barbados. So
yes,
that was one big thing for me, is either like go school in Florida or go school in New York. I don't like winters. So it sort of narrowed it to just Florida for me. And it was one of the better schools in terms of just like ratings and stuff. So that's why I decided to go there.
I see. And so I guess from knowing that you kind of love computers, you discovered and probably did some more research, you decided, all right, computer science is kind of where I want to go to. And you have mathematical science and computer science. Is that the official degree from FIT?
Yeah, so I did 2 degrees. So I started just doing computer science. But then as all of my elective courses, I'm good at math, like nothing else I'm really particularly good at. So it's like, let me do math classes, keep my GPA high. And like eventually I did so many math classes. They're like, hey, if you just do these 2 other math classes in your final year, you get a degree in mathematics as well. So I was like, all right, I guess. And then I ended up with a double degree.
Vibes. And so that meant you got a scholarship to come to FIT, or you were able to come in and get certain financial support outside?
I came on a Barbados scholarship. So in my country, there's a program where if you, at least at that time, I think the rules have changed slightly, but if you have what's the equivalent of a 4.0, or like, maybe you can get like 1B, but like it's like 3.9 something, I believe. The government will give you what's called a Barbados scholarship, and then they'll pay for your tuition, and actually it's just your tuition. They'll pay for your tuition to go to like pretty much anywhere that you can get into in the world. And that's how I got to Florida.
And did Florida Tech probably give you some kind of scholarship because of good grades as well and stuff like that?
So that's a whole other story for a different day, but not really.
Okay. All right. So you end up in Florida Tech, and as a legend so has it, in my mind, as I know you now, as a software engineer, and what I'd seen of you in college, you were an extremely dedicated student. So tell me if that actually is really the case in your time in college, and what was sort of your mindset as you decided, all right, I'm in the States, you got a chance to come up, and what was your approach?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think people thought it was like, at least for the Caribbean students like that we would hang with, they thought it was easy for me, but it wasn't easy. Like, I would be up like 1 o'clock in the morning, like almost every night, just like studying whatever courses it was that I was doing. And that transition to like having really good grades and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really a lot of focus and dedication to just like, for one, I had come on a scholarship for my country. You had to like maintain a certain, you couldn't like feel anything or they would take it back.
Yes.
But also just like understanding that I couldn't afford to be here and I didn't have time to waste or money to waste. Like, it really motivated me to make sure that I took full advantage of the opportunity that was presented.
Yes. And were you really close to a lot of your professors and stuff like that? Or did you just more or less study on your own and really just push yourself in that regard?
The computer science professors, for sure. I don't know if you knew, but like our department was really small. And in fact, like my birthday was 2 days ago, and one of the professors we still talk to this day, and he messaged to wish me happy birthday. So yeah, like there's some of the best cheerleaders I had while I was there. Yeah, that's
incredible. And so you're staying up till 1 a.m. a lot, and it makes more sense now that I know you're on scholarship. So, you know, while everybody else, I think a lot of other people who were there they were paid to some degree or had other financial support. So it's good to know that why you were so motivated. But as you've gone through all of that work over that time, what did that sort of do to your base work ethic that led you to, get into Amazon afterwards?
Yeah, I think it really pushed my drive into a higher state than it was before I came. How to say this and not like sound like a douchebag trying to be super pompous, but like I was really motivated to try to be at the top. Like we had some really impressive people in our computer science department. Like, I don't know if you know Sharif, like Microsoft now, Chow, Dylan, all those guys are Microsoft. And for one, I wanted to be like at least where they were at. So like it really drove me to like try to be getting into these programs like at Amazon, at Microsoft, wherever the case may be, and to like strive for that.
So you were so you were not the top of the class, because I would have thought that you were like number one, number two. But
I was number. So it was. I actually don't remember who ended up on top, but there was this guy in my year named Sharif. I believe like we were 1 and 2, and at the end we were our GPAs were like 0.02 separated or something. I forget who was the one who came on top, but that probably means that was him, but I'm trying to forget.
Yeah. No, that's exciting because one of the main reasons I like to look at people's career journeys is why the hell do they work as hard as they do? And it's always interesting to understand those motivations. And it seems for you so far, it's all right, I have an opportunity. I need to maximize that, probably because your mom would definitely let you have it if you went home and, and you didn't do it. And the other one is sort of being competitive. And I've interviewed other people, especially from the Caribbean, where that competitive spirit or that drive to be at the top was a good factor as well. Tell us about your time. So you're at Florida Tech, you're doing well, you're studying quite hard. Were there what was your most challenging class that you took as a computer science student?
Most challenging class. So I forget the actual name of the class. Let me try to I forget, but it was mostly learning the language Haskell. So Haskell is actually, the class was functional programming. So we were learning the language Haskell, weird. And it's like totally different to like all the imperative like languages, Java, C++, whatever the case may be. And to wrap your mind around how to write Haskell programs for the first like, I'd say half of the semester, maybe first third of the semester, I just wasn't getting it. But like, once that switch flipped, like now I'm a huge proponent of functional languages. I love Haskell. Really? Like I plan to name my firstborn son Haskell. I think it's just like a beautiful language. And I think that was the most difficult class that I had while I was at FIT.
Cool. What were your study habits like? So you like to code, and did you have any sort of fear when you started to try to code different things that you weren't sure how to do?
For sure. Like to this day, I still have fear sometimes. I don't think that's ever gone away. I think it's just to embrace it and to always trying to be learning. Like the thing that I'm really good at is solving like algorithmic type problems, like those types of deep like mathematical problems. The integrating with like different APIs or like I don't know, writing API docs or whatever the case may be is like not something that I'm tremendously excited to do. Obviously, I have to do it in my job, but yeah, just like embracing it, like understanding like hey, something I'm weak at. And to this day, I still like read books and read articles about trying to like improve your writing for technical docs, stuff like that. Yeah.
And you how many years of experience you have now? You technically almost have 10 years, right?
I guess so. When did I graduate? I think it was January
2012.
No, 2013, because I actually started in January of 2009, and I went to Amazon in January of 2013. So just shy of 10 years. Yeah.
Very exciting. And what was your experience like as an intern at Amazon?
Oh, it was tremendous. And in fact, it led me down a path that I probably shouldn't have taken. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit. So I went there as an intern, and some background into this, like that summer I had applied to Amazon, I got the offer, and I was just like so thrilled. I signed it immediately, did like really look into it much. I was just like, oh, Amazon, I'm so excited. But then like I was also interviewing with Microsoft, and they gave me the offer like 2 days later, and the offer was like more money, like better everything, even as an intern. But I was just like, oh, I already signed the Amazon offer. I need to be loyal and respect this. And that is, I think, the correct thing to do. I probably shouldn't have signed as quickly as I did. But I went there. I went and joined the Kindle team, and like to this day, some of those people I still talk to. The team was amazing. Summers in Seattle are amazing. Amazon was amazing. I learned so much during that internship. And the thing that it led me to do that probably wasn't the best was the day that I was leaving. My manager was like, "Hey, you're great. We want you to come back full time once you graduate," because it was actually the summer, and then I would graduate in December. So they were like, "Come back in January." I was like, "Okay, let me think about it." And they were like, "Sure," but then HR reached out. HR was like, "We needed to give us an answer like within this time frame." Was it really short? And I was actually interviewing with Microsoft like 2 days like before that happened, before the deadline. But then it got pushed because when I was flying there, it was like a winter storm. I forget what it was, but it got delayed by a couple of days, and I had to go the next week. And Amazon wouldn't let me extend it, but Microsoft was like, "Oh, come anyways. Like, we'll see what happens." So I signed with Amazon. I went, did the interviews with Microsoft. They gave me an offer, and I guess I could talk numbers now because this was like almost 10 years ago. These numbers are nowhere. They're not important, and they're way off of what they are now. But it was like the Amazon offer, let's say 90K in base salary, like ignoring stock and all that stuff. And then the Microsoft offer was like 150K fresh out of college. And it was like better stock, all this stuff. And I had already signed the Amazon offer. And to me, a promise is everything. And like having signed that, I made my promise to Amazon that I would be there, all that stuff. But I think my career would have gone slightly differently, and maybe who knows what would have happened. But
yes,
having had that great summer internship, it made me make that decision to like rush and sign that offer. And my life would have been totally different if I hadn't and had gone to Microsoft instead. So who knows?
So let me ask this different question. What if you could have gotten the same exact outcomes? Everything happened the same, but you had an opportunity to somehow change that decision, right? Knowing that you have a lot more career capital now, you're a lot more experienced. What would you have told younger Kesaan to do in that situation?
I would have told young Kesaan to get more time from Amazon.
And to push back.
But then I
right?
was like, I had no one to talk to about this kind of stuff. Like I didn't have a mentor. And I think that's something super important for college students to have in any field, but especially in computer science, where you have like these, what appear to you coming out of college, like massive offers, but really like you have a tremendously valuable skill that these companies want. And like, you have to recognize that and like be your own advocate in your negotiations, stuff like that. And again, my advice to my younger self would have just been to, even if I had decided to go to Amazon or whatever the case may be, I could have, for one, negotiated better for myself. Like I didn't negotiate anything back then. Like these numbers were bananas numbers to me at that point in my life. And I was just like, oh yeah, sure. But yeah, just have taken more time and gone back and like fought and advocated for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting how come they don't have a class on that in school strategically negotiating a salary, especially as a computer scientist.
I mean, it's like the same reason we don't have like finance classes, and we should, but that's a whole different story for a different day.
True story. So you took the full offer at Amazon, and you're like, all right, well, I could see what some of the numbers are at outside. And what was your experience like within Amazon, and what did you learn there?
It was tremendous. Well, I learned so much. Well, I learned so much during my internship, and then I learned so much during the year I was at Amazon. For one, I got to understand what like working true, like even as an intern, you get put on a project and it's your mentor, and like it's somewhat contained where they make sure that everything is sort of like a paved road. Like sure, you have to do some investigations, you might have to talk to some other teams, but for the most part, they shield you from a lot of the stuff that's actually involved in developing like production software, working with a team. But then going there in my first year and like working with a team for the first time, having to like be accountable to a timeline that actually meant something to external customers, and making sure that deliverables were on track, stuff like that was eye-opening. And then just like the actual writing of code, like I learned so much in terms of I didn't even like, I guess this is my own deficiency, but I did back then 10 years ago, dependency injection was, I guess it was always a thing, but it was new to me out of college. And like the first time I saw it, it blew my mind. And just like tons of things like that you learn, like protocol buffers and all sorts of fun stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. What was that shift like for you coming in as a software engineer outside of school and then seeing, real software, legit software engineers? What was the imposter syndrome like stepping in?
It's huge, and to this day, I still have imposter syndrome. My fiance is always trying. She always tells me like, you do realize like, again, you worked at Google, Amazon. Like, I have offers from Microsoft. Like, you're good enough to be at these places, but sometimes I still think to myself, like, what am I doing here? But especially coming out of college back then, like, I especially had it then, where like I was always like, I was super afraid that someone would find me out and it'd be like, oh, you're fired now. And like, I'm not to that stage anymore. But I remember what was it? I was there for like maybe 2 months, 3 months, and I submitted a CL, and it was like to a customer facing product. And one of the customers wrote in, and it was like, sorry, I don't want to derail this, but it needs a little bit of background where we were getting these times from like USPS because it was to show like shipping information and UPS. But the shipping information that they were sending us was like the dates were sometimes like these weird strings, and we would like try to parse them and make them instantly readable. But what happened was there's this customer who would like sit on his porch and like see when stuff got delivered, and we were showing them a date that didn't match at the time, that didn't match like what was actually happening. And it got like, I think because back then you could write to Jeff at Amazon, and he would like get your emails or whatever. And my manager was like, oh, we got this like complaint, like our thing is wrong. And I'm like, well, we got this from UPS. I don't know what to do about this. And then like I was like, oh, I'm getting fired for this. And then my tech lead was like, hey, like they gave us this time. This is the time that we were presenting to customers. There's nothing we could do about this. And like he stood up and defended me in that situation. But I was like, oh, pretty sure I was getting fired back then. But
yeah. I feel the same. I just, like I was telling you, I had that story where the CEO reached out on an email that I had sent, and I was like, oh gosh, this is it. Like I'm done type stuff. But then some other folks did step in and sort of support the point that I was making. So it's cool that at these big software companies, at least Amazon back then, when Jeff Bezos was probably more accessible, that people really took that much interest into their business. That's kind of cool. Okay, so you get to the end of Amazon, and now you decide to sneak into Google. So is Google like the place you always wanted to be?
Yeah, for sure. Like I remember when I came to the US, like I had 2 companies in mind that I was like, these were like in a million years, if I could get to one, this is a day happy. It was either get to Microsoft or get to Google. Okay. And like for one, back then, I guess even to this day, Google's somewhat is notorious for having difficult like technical interviews where like we ask very challenging algorithmic problems. And I didn't think I'd be able to get into Google. So how to put this and not sound terrible towards Microsoft, but like Microsoft seemed more attainable to me than Google.
Yeah.
And I didn't like in a million years think I would get in. And then when I got the offer, like I actually, when I was leaving Google, I wrote in my email like, hey, I remember like the day when I got the offer to come here. Like, and to me, like I still think back on that day like semi-frequently, when like the feeling that I had of like that accomplishment and the joy of that. And yeah, again, Google's my pinnacle in terms of software engineering. I was like tremendously excited to be there.
What was the interview process like? How brutal was it?
Well, I think my home heard me say Google and tried to respond, and I missed what he said.
No, I was saying, how brutal was that interview process when you first got into Google?
Yeah, I mean, it was really rough. Like the problems that they answer are very challenging. But I guess that is one of the things that I liked about the process, where you had challenging problems, but your interviewers were there to help and like sort of guide you along the path. Like they wouldn't give you an answer, but as you like turned your wheels, they might like throw in a hint here, throw in a hint there, and like the accomplishment that you feel when you solve like what is a very technically challenging problem was like tremendous. And I really enjoyed the process, having interviewed there. And I used to interview, like conduct interviews, and I used to really enjoy the process. I do hiring committee now, but it was a lot of fun.
And so I know you run like a side group, or you help a group of our friends in the interviewing, and it's interesting to sort of see you even after so many years. Okay, we're going to solve this problem, and someone poses a solution, and then you actually tell them the answer. And how are you still able to stay that sharp? Do you code a lot in your day to day right now?
So again, having come back from strike, like I'm mostly just ramping up on the team, like doing a lot of reading docs and stuff like that. But when I was at strike, I wasn't coding that much. But even when I don't code, like on Saturdays and Sundays, I would just go to like LeetCode or HackerRank and like try to find a difficult problem, and like that'll be my Saturday afternoon or my Sunday afternoon. Yeah. To me, like back when I used to go and spend my lunch hours just like writing garbage Pascal programs, like that is how I find a lot of enjoyment. Just like solving these types of algorithmic problems. Yeah.
Okay, so even if it's difficult, you still go and sit with the challenge. And what would you say to folks who have trouble with sitting with difficult things that you don't necessarily, the solutions are very clear, and what's your mindset when you go to approach a problem like that?
For one, I'll say it gets easier. Like I remember when I started, like problems that I wouldn't even have to think about now used to be like tremendously difficult for me. But like as you see more and more of them, like they're all, not all, but like a lot of them will fit into a certain mold. Like, oh, this is a convex hull problem, or this is like Dijkstra's, or this is like some sort of tree traversal, whatever the case may be. Like you'll start to get an intuition for under what family a problem is. And as you get that, problems become a lot easier. And then like you actually start to look for the challenging ones, the ones that like make you think a little bit more, or that you have to do some research into a new, like whatever the case may be. Like there was this problem recently I'd never really seen something like it before, and it made me learn about this data structure called binary index trees. They're really cool, and I had never even like heard of them, but it was like perfect for solving this problem. And once I learned about them, I'm like, oh, binary industries are awesome. I wish I knew about them before. So yeah, that's very for cool. Me, that's a lot of enjoyment.
And so right now you're an IC, right? You're an individual contributor. And what kept you sort of on that track? I think even at NVIDIA, you don't have to be a manager to sort of progress really high up in your career. You can be an IC and pretty much follow the exact same track as a manager. So what led you to choose the IC track versus the manager track?
I just like to have my hands in the pie, in the mix, I guess you would say. And at Google, I think that's actually supported. Like my first manager, she is tremendous. Like to this day, like no offense to any of my other managers, but she was the person who pushed me the most, who like I look up to the most. She was like super inspirational. I think she's a principal engineer at Google now. And like she was our manager, and she at that time she was like senior staff software engineer. And she would still like review most of our PRs. She was like writing code on a day-to-day basis. And she actually left being a manager, went back to being an IC for a while at like senior staff level, and then decided to go back to being a manager again. And she's been my motivation. Like I'm sure like in my goal right now is to get to staff in like a year or two. And I probably, if I hadn't have left, would have been near there. Like I left with an exceeds expectation when I went to strike. But obviously I reset now that I come back. But I want to get to staff. And once I get to staff, I'll probably start managing a team or become like a TLM, whatever the case may be. But I will stay I want to stay near to the code, implementing stuff, like going through designs, things along that line.
All right. Nice. And I think what's kind of interesting in some of these tech companies, like you could remain a senior software engineer for a while. And from the outside, it might seem like you're not moving, like you're not having actual upward movement, but in reality, there's so many levels within like the senior bucket. Is that the case at Google?
In fact, Google, yes, and in fact, Google, I think senior is like the considered terminal level. Like you can stay at senior, and you won't have any like no one's gonna
like look up.
You're not gonna be. Yeah, exactly. You're not going to be asked to leave or whatever the case. It'd be like there are people who've been at senior who've been there 14 years still at senior, right. And like for other people, they want to move on to staff or whatever the case may be. So I would say it's like you no longer have upward trajectory, but the breadth of and scope of senior at Google is quite large. So you are like tasked with doing a lot of stuff that it's a joke that we have a lot where you like, oh, you're a VP at a startup. Here, you're like level 4 at Google as a suite, or whatever the case is. You're a director, senior software engineer. Like senior at Google is a very like encompassing role. Yeah.
And tell the audience what's some of the timeframes that you have to deliver features. So, for instance, okay, you finish a design review. You know what you're going to implement. You know, is it a week? Is it a couple of weeks that you have to ship something?
Well, I mean, it all depends on the thing. A couple of weeks is I've never had something that was a couple of weeks. Is like a quarter is usually like a short timeline. Like when I was in Google Pay, we were launching tap and pay for MTA. Like in New York, you can now go like use your phone to get into terminals and stuff. And for us, I think that was like a maybe 2-quarter project. Like we were going to Visa, going to Cubic, doing all sorts of testing. So like that is more along the lines of what a typical project would be like, a couple quarters.
Nice. And what's the strongest language, by the way?
Me right now it's Java, but on my new team we're actually writing in Go. So I've been reading and learning Go, and I'm very excited about the language. It's really, I'd heard a lot about it before, and I sort of like just yeah, sure, whatever. I like Java, but no, I'm actually writing Go. I'm like, oh, cool, Go is really cool.
Okay. Nice. And so technically you're almost coding almost every day now, right? Or you try to?
Well, again, I just rejoined Google, mostly just like getting up to speed, like reading docs from the team. So I'm not coding. I haven't written a line of code since I got back to Google. In my personal time, yes, I've like solved some problems on leak code, whatever the case may be, but I haven't coded since I've been back.
Gotcha. All right. So you left Google and you went to Stripe for a year. So you were at Mountain View. Actually, quite right before that, what was your experience like working on campus? So I know your commute was a bit brutal from what I saw. At least you sat on a bus for a while to get to work. Yeah, talk about that.
I just remember, when you visited, I was still in Mountain View, I believe, but I left Mountain View and moved up to SF when I joined Google Pay. So the commute was actually the reason I left. Like, it was an hour and a half in good traffic each direction, so like 3 hours a day on a shuttle. It was gruesome. So there's Wi-Fi on the shuttles, but the Wi-Fi is not stable. So like even just like basic SSH sessions would time out. So you have to use like Tmux or something. It was rough. So once I got to senior in ads, I decided it was time for me to like shorten that commute, and that's when I made the transition to Google Pay and moved to SF.
Cool. Yeah, at least when we visited you out there, and you know, I arrived on campus, I was like, wow, this thing is beautiful because you get free drinks, free food, games. I guess they do your laundry if possible, and
you can do your own laundry, but there's laundry machines.
Okay. But in my mind, I was like, wow, this is a trap because I would probably never leave. Did you feel that way when you got there in terms of why would I need to maybe go outside and I could just have a lot of these things taken care of for you?
Well, I mean, it's still a workplace. You don't have like the restaurants aren't open on weekends, and yes, there's gays, but there's like only so much you can do with your friends there, stuff like that. So I'd say it's a try to make you comfortable there. And again, this is part of what I was saying about like, if I didn't leave like during COVID and go to Stripe, I would never have left. But I think Trap is
I'm using that
way
as
to
a strong word,
describe
but
it. Yeah, I would say it's a trap, but they're tremendous creature comforts there.
well, for me, it would have been a trap because when I see free unlimited juice and free unlimited coconut water, you win. I'm not leaving. I'm just gonna drink that whole day.
There's gyms. You've been super happy.
Yeah. And I had visited Microsoft's campus as well, and in Seattle, and that was a beautiful place. And it's just so nice to come and see so many people engaging with their work and just kind of living a different life versus, you work for a tiny company that's like I used to work for a railroad company. So imagine going into a building of people working on railroad, which is probably polar opposite to Google, essentially, right? Um, okay, interesting. So in the last sort of segment of the podcast, we'd like to, now that we've gotten kind of a view of your journey so far, think of this as the advice section. So what two pieces of advice would you have for a high schooler, a college student, and a professional? And, you spent so much time at Google, right? But just throughout your sort of work life, what have you learned that you think others should know and not make any mistakes?
Oh man, you really put me on the spot here. Well, for one, I don't think I'm equipped to give advice to anyone, but if I'm forced to, like in high school, I'd say one thing that I think people should do is get a breath of stuff. Like at least when I was in high school, you have like these set courses for you, and if you didn't find the thing that interested you, like I only got to computer science in my like almost second to last year. You could be again like a fish trying to climb a tree. Like you just didn't find the thing that interests you. And there's a lot of stuff to do in the world. Like maybe computer science isn't for you, maybe math isn't for you, whatever the case may be. But like just try a lot of things and see what interests you, see what you're good at, and what is exciting. And the other thing is just like keep an open mind. And I guess that's almost the same thing as the first one. But when I say an open mind, like don't feel pigeonholed into something because it's what like your parents want you to do, or it's what like your teachers are pushing you towards. Like try to think for yourself. And at this stage, you should be like able to afford your own path, I guess. And then for college, like I'd say maintain a focus. That's really hard. And it's something that fortunately I think I was okay at, where like obviously you want to enjoy yourself is like one of the most exciting times of your life, but like don't let the experience of partying and whatever else in like distract you from where you want to be outside of college, like after college. Like have that focus, have that determination to find out where you want to be. And then also somewhat similar to a high school, like explore a lot there as well in terms of like you might find something that interests you more than the path that you're currently on. I guess this applies at every stage of life, but I have a couple of friends. I don't know if you knew Dylan back when we were in college, but he was studying mechanical engineering, but he took computer science like 1 year, and he like joined a programming practice squad with myself and this other guy, Joffrey, and he actually switched his major in his like second last year from mechanical engineering to computer science, and now he's like I think he leads some part of Bing at Microsoft. So like if he hadn't have like tried that one computer science elective, he'd probably be building bridges or something at this point in his life. So just like having the ability to just like keep exploring and looking for the thing that interests you. And then for professional, again, I don't know if I'm the right one to be giving advice to anyone, but what I've been trying to do in my professional life is find the people that like you can look to as motivation, like who are further along in their careers. For me, again, my old manager, I still like keep tabs on her, what she's doing at work at Google, like try to talk to her, get some advice, stuff like that. Like my friends, I'm looking to the ones who've made it to the levels that I want to be at, like staff or principal, whatever the case may be, and trying to glean from them what helped them to get to like whatever level it's at that they're at that I want to get to. Is that two? No, it's just one. What's another one? I would also just like keep learning.
Okay.
I've recently rejoined, as I said, as we talked about a lot, Google, and in my new team, we're like doing linear optimizations, trying to solve like these inequalities. And this is stuff that I did like years ago in college, but I've forgotten and I have to relearn now. I'm doing like all sorts of normal distribution analysis and like weighted percentage error, all sorts of stuff that like we did all these years ago that I've completely forgotten, but I have to relearn and just like really redevelop that skill of this analytical mathematics to solve these like really complex linear inequalities, stuff like that. So yeah.
Interesting. So other than you sort of wanting to rise certain levels, and when I say rise certain levels, that can mean different things, right? There's pay bands, there is also technical mastery, there is also like you're just in a new peer group as well. But what else motivates you? Because you really love computer science, so that's very clear.
Yeah, so that's what makes it easy for me. But the thing that one thing that motivates me a lot now is like being a, I don't want to be like anybody's idol, but like an inspiration for the kids that come after. Like,
yeah,
when I was coming up, there weren't a lot of like Black software engineers who even reached like senior software engineer level. Like when I joined, the only person that I knew who was senior at Google was this guy named Travis Mayfield. I think he's like staff at this point, but like there was nobody else. And I don't want it to be that way for like the next kid, like from the Caribbean who comes in and who's like looking for somewhere they can reach out to from the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazons, wherever. And like, there's nobody that's like either there or like a level that they want to get to and have like a path or like someone that can mentor them along the way. That's why I want to get to like these levels to help the next kid, and then maybe he can go to level higher than me, and then the next kid goes level higher than him, and eventually like we'll be CEOs or whatever of like these types of companies.
That's vibes, man. So just on record, I am inspired by you, and I'll tell you. You know, I don't know if you remember that story when you had come to school once and I was in my PhD. So just for those that are listening, you know, you all see me working at NVIDIA now, but I was quite useless as a programmer probably up until the first maybe couple of years in my PhD. But my undergrad was chemical engineering, so absolutely no programming. A little bit of MATLAB, which confused the hell out of me. And in retrospect, I wish I had done computer science from like high school because my dad had a computer company from when I was like 10 years old. I had every single advanced computer. Like if I told my dad I wanted the most advanced computer, like it was already there essentially in my house. So it's interesting how I was so close to computing, yet so completely far. And now that I've kind of gone through this long journey, I'd wished I'd taken computing and just computer science in general more seriously. But you came into school and you were conducting interviews. And to me, this is a good story of failure and not sort of giving up, not to give myself any sort of praise there. There was, I'd only known how to program in MATLAB. And I was looking through my PhD pictures and I saved a screenshot of this, so it'll make sense soon. And you had to come and do a programming challenge in the class. And if you did well, you'd have gotten an interview at Google. So I was in my PhD. I come and I was like, "Oh, Kesaan, what's going on?" I reached late. I'm like, I walk into the room, everybody's looking at me like, "You idiot, you're already late." And then I come, I say hi to you. So they're like, "Okay, he kind of knows the dude, fine." So I go to sit down. I'm like, "All right, let me try this programming problem." I go to choose a language in the IDE, and I don't see MATLAB there. And I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, I didn't know how to do Python. I didn't know how to do anything else, and I had never felt so embarrassed in my entire life. I walk up to you and I'm like, Kesaan, like, there's no MATLAB. You're like, you kind of watch me like, yeah, there's no MATLAB. What do you mean? Like, that's not like a reprogramming language. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm quite useless in terms of getting into Google. So I pick up all my stuff and I leave. And imagine me, I'm a PhD student. I'm walking into a room full of undergrads and stuff like that are just absolutely walking all over me. But I took a picture of that and I was like, never again will this ever happen to me. So that's my story of like wanting to get to Google and, failing abysmally.
Well, that is, I remember that day. Like, I remember we had those like BBs at the front. I remember you walking. I remember that clear as day, but like, I didn't know it had that kind of impact. So like, you never know what's happening to somebody else's life. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I guess to those that are listening, as you think about getting into these big tech companies, I think, even listening to Kesaan, there's still fear to some degree in new challenges that you go to solve at many different levels. So I guess don't necessarily be afraid. And even if you fail an interview, which I've failed, I think multiple Google interviews, which is all right. Like, you come back stronger the next time and make sure that you use it. I do have a little chip on my shoulder from that picture. I was like, no, I need to, and I do sort of have silent dreams to come to Google. That was one of my goals during my PhD. I had put on a slide, like when I graduate, I'll go work for Google, and my advisors kind of watch me like, yeah, whatever, So now that I'm in NVIDIA, it's, one step closer, I would say. And I really share that just so that people listening, just don't give up, man.
I guess I should add to that, and like maybe we made it sound too easy for me, but like for my first 2 years in college, like I tried getting internships at like Amazon, Microsoft. I flew to Microsoft 3 times before I got an offer from Microsoft. And every time I was like, for one, the first time I was like scared shitless. I was like, I don't know what's happening here. I did horrifically. The next time, slightly better. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll get offered. Did get offered. Third time, finally got the offer, but like it was a progress. Like every year I got a little bit better. I got a little more comfortable, and like I just never gave up. But yeah, it wasn't like just walking the door like, oh, I'm awesome, like give me a job. It took me a while to get there.
Cool. Yeah, it's good to know that you're human. How do you sort of keep yourself on track? So now that, here's something I've experienced, right? So the entire time you come to the States, you're an international student. If you sort of fail school, you get deported, and your opportunity at, this great life that you're hoping for evaporates. Now that you don't necessarily have to worry a lot about that, and we know that you want to rise certain ranks to be a great example for those following, what helps you stay on track on like a day-to-day basis?
That's a really challenging question. Like I don't really think about it in like it just comes naturally for me, I guess. Like every Sunday I talk to my mom, and she always tells me, I'm praying for you, and I know you're going to do great. And like for me, doing great is being that inspiration for the next kid that comes along on this path. Like my fiance and I talk about this, like we could probably start working now, and like we'd have to cut back a lot, but we could survive. Like we don't have to be like trying to do this. Like really, we're doing it. Well, I'm doing it to like, for one, make sure that when I have a kid, like he has a great life, but also to be that inspiration for like the next software engineer, next kid from the Caribbean that's trying to do this. So yeah, and I guess that's what helps me to maintain my focus.
That makes sense. Are you into goal setting?
No, to be honest, I remember like maybe it was like when I had first moved to Google New York, you mentioned to me, I was like texting you as I was walking to like the office, and you were like, oh, like that's when you just got to NVIDIA actually, and you were telling me about your goals, and like for one, your gym goals, and also you were like starting to do I think some like land. Like
I was doing some land investing at that point. Yeah.
And you were telling me about how like this time you want to be doing this, and like you were like setting these goals. So I've never gone to that stage, but I remember you talking a lot about it. Okay.
And it's interesting. I like to learn how different people sort of navigate their life. And so for those of you out there that don't set goals, you can still do really, really well. So good example in Kesaan here. I would say other than programming, what is something that you do that comes easy to you, but it's hard for others?
Something that comes easy to me. I'd say investing. Like, and I think maybe it's an offshoot of liking math, but like, I'm not the next Warren Buffett or anything, but like, I can usually over a year, like, this is gonna sound crazy, but like I outperformed this S&P like on my own like small scale like most of the time. Like I've only ever been beat by like 2 years over like almost 10 years of investing. So that's one thing that I think I usually have a lot of patience. I've sort of strayed away from that a little bit now. I'm going to like Wall Street bets, like doing like risky options trades. But even then, I only keep it like very small and like do it with like a play amount of money and not like my real portfolio. But like, yeah, investing is one thing I think that I do better than most. That comes easily to me.
Tell us about investing. Why do you take that? Other than the fun for the sport of it, how important do you think it is?
I think it's really important. Like, it has a lot to do with my background as well. Like, again, not we haven't really talked about a lot, but my mother is not rich. Like, I was actually super poor when I was a kid. Like,
okay, wow.
and it means a lot to me to be able to like try to set up a future for my children when they do get here. Like, make sure that they have it easier than I did, and that the path that they have to take isn't as hard as the one I had to take. And the way I think that you do that is like by taking ownership in something. And I view stock trade, not even trading, but just like investing in stocks is doing that. Like, technically on a small part of Apple, like minusculely small, but like
Yes,
I can leave that for them or whatever the case may be, just by like having bought their stock. So that's what it means to me, and I try to be good at it. Yeah.
All right. So what are your top 3 rules for investing?
Top 3 rules for investing.
Let me hear your philosophy.
I guess I'll steal this one from Warren Buffett. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Like when you see everything's going up and everyone is having like the best of times, like be a little bit skeptical about that. When like everyone is like horribly afraid of selling everything, like don't try to catch a falling knife, but you should be getting ready to like pick up when there's like actual blood in the streets, when people are getting margin calls, stuff like that. Don't take outsized risks. Like,
okay,
I was telling you the story earlier today where on Friday I lost like 30 grand, and it's not like a tremendous amount, but I probably should have taken that risk. It was I broke my own rule there, but like, yeah, make sure you're trading where you're comfortable and where like if you lose the money, like you don't even think about it again. Like, I thought about this a couple of times and all, like I probably should have made this trade. So it was outside for where I should have been. And be patient. Like obviously historical results don't predict future outcomes, but like historically, if you just like sit in the market and just like did nothing with your money, just left it in S&P or whatever index, like more likely than not, you would have made boatloads of money. And trying to trade around like doing like in and out trades all the time is usually a way to lose money. Like I follow like day traders just to see what they're saying and whatnot, but like if you follow them closely enough and not just listen to what they're saying, a lot of them lose a lot of money. And it's because, for one, they don't have like a lot of patience to sit and wait, and their like strategy is totally opposed to doing that. So yeah, those are my 3 like basic rules.
Good. So what are 3 books you recommend?
Oh,
tell us about your book platform as well.
I'll tell you the 3 books that I've read or listened to. I don't read a lot. Like I hardly ever have I don't sit down and read, but I drive semi-frequently. So when I'm driving, I'll put an audiobook on. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. This is just like the story of Nike. It's found in his like biography almost. Actually, this one is sort of an old one, but it's called Barbarians at the Gate. And this was the takeover of KKR Nabisco by, I forget the name of the fund that took them over, but pretty much they used a lot of debt to take over this company. And it was just a very interesting story of like the inside dealings of like Wall Street finance, stuff like that. And I guess I'll toss a second one into that category, which is Flash Boys. And this talks just about how high frequency trading works, how they sort of like take advantage of the delays in trades and like are able to run trades a little bit and make money off of that. And then the last one I actually only started listening to yesterday, and I texted like 3 different people, hey, you should listen to this book. I told them, text me back, and like, oh, I read this already. Like, you're late to the book. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. By Mark Maron.
How's it going so far? Like, you like it?
It's yeah. I've only gotten like only started yesterday on the drive to Costco. It was like the first chapter maybe, but I do like it, and it's very. And I can see why it has such high ratings. It speaks a lot to like, I guess all of these types of books speak to human nature and like the problem that we all commonly face. But he expresses it in a very eloquent and like relatable way. So I think I'll give it a listen, and hopefully I can recommend it at the end of it. Yeah,
I gotta check that out for sure. A number of people have sort of told me that so far. Okay, and this is a sort of a weird question, but what are three principles you live by? And what I'm maybe looking for is, I think I picked up on certain things as you shared throughout it, but if you could maybe summarize it as like quarter Kesaan as you sort of live your life.
I guess I should do this more often. I should get you to send me these questions and just like think about them because like I live my life like really free flow. Like don't set,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, goals or stuff like that. I just like sort of try to go with the flow. But go with the flow, like I guess there are some guiding principles. Like I try to do what I enjoy and things that excite me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm fortunate enough that I've gotten to the point where I can do that. Like coming back to Google, I was able to choose a team that I want to work on and like that I think will have exciting projects and stuff that will
Mm-hmm.
give me that joy. But the other thing is just like this is not at all related to work or anything, but just like general life, like being kind to others. I travel a lot, and one thing that it's interesting. Like my mom, she's all like she always asks me when I'm going to like Tennessee or like I don't know places with like somewhat sketchy reputations. She's always like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
be careful!" Like, well, obviously you have to be there. There's just like some actual
Yeah,
bad
where?
people out there. But one thing that I've come to understand is like everyone's just trying to live. Most people are just trying to live life. Like they don't have any malintent towards other people. Like they want the
Mm-hmm.
best for their children, best for their family. And if you treat them with kindness, more likely than not, they'll reflect that towards you. And it will like tremendously improve your life. And also there's like when your interactions are not full of malice, but just like open understanding of each other. And then number three, I I don't even know what to toss in there. I feel like my life is really simple, and those two cover it all.
Okay.
Um,
Which
yeah.
is cool, right? And I've learned a lot about. I've had a perception of you for many years, and I think what I sort of secretly admired, I like people who really mastered their craft, and it seems to some degree that you have a lot of room to grow naturally, like all of us, right? Because you're still gunning sort of for the top, but I like to hear. I've enjoyed hearing that all of the extra things that you do, sort of following something that really interests you, and it kind of so be it that the thing that really interests you is you actually do it for work, which is quite exciting as well. So good. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of the insights. And I guess the last thing I would ask is, what advice do you have for someone who wants to come work for Google?
I'm actually going to ask you a question. That book
Oh,
in the middle of your second shelf, what is
uh-huh.
that?
Introduction to Algorithms, the big one.
Okay, I thought that's what it is. I was going to say read that book.
Yeah. So I did actually, I think it might have been you. Somebody told me to. So, if I ask myself, am I a reader? I am a wannabe reader. Let's call it that. And two, I attempt to absorb knowledge by surrounding myself with a shit ton of books. So I actually have a good data structures book there and stuff like that. And yeah, I think for me, it's at least having access to the information when I want to go learn it is makes me feel better about myself. But in general, I think it, at least for me, it comes down to what problem am I have to solve right now. And I'm a big proponent of just-in-time learning because otherwise it kind of vaporizes from my mind sometimes.
Yeah.
So so
But
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask yeah, what last piece of advice you'd have for folks that want to come work at Google? Because at
Oh,
least for a lot of people, that's like a fascination and a dream to some degree.
I think it depends a lot on where you're trying to go in. Like I can
Okay.
speak to software engineering, like I can't
Mm-hmm.
speak to a program manager or like business analyst, stuff like that. But for a programmer, like you want to really hone your like base skills in terms of just like, and when I say hone it, like people are like, oh yeah, I know like binary trees or I know like traversals or whatever the case may be, but like to get a Google, you really have to know this stuff, like really,
Mm-hmm.
really know it in terms of like being able to apply it to cases that you wouldn't even have thought of when you get asked the types of questions that you see in Google interviews. Um, and I'd say that's it. And also just getting a little bit lucky with the flip of the coin.
Yeah.
We joke about this in hiring committee, but sometimes you see like an interview packet where the person was asked all like moderate questions, and we were like, oh yeah, those questions are fine, that we can all solve them, blah blah. And then you see a packet where it's like impossible question, impossible question, impossible question. You're like, I can even solve these. Like, what is happening here? So
Okay.
sometimes just like the luck of the draw in the interviews, and obviously those cases are super rare. We were like trying to correct for that and like reach out to the interviewers and let them know like, hey, you should adjust, blah blah. But yeah, just make sure you know your hone your craft, like know it really well, and also just like try to reach out. Like I would say a lot of the people who reach out to me who I can like someone can vouch for, I will just give them a referral. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this person like is a friend of a friend, but they speak highly of them, whatever the case may be. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask. Um, what part of your Caribbean heritage, or what proponent of your Caribbean heritage has led to success in your career? That could be from connecting with people. So, for instance, a big part of my success has been, I met Larry Hercules, who was from Trinidad a long time ago, because I just went to San Francisco randomly and I heard his accent and I started talking to him, and that led to a cascade of connections and things that spawned a lot of opportunities. But any thoughts on that?
It's interesting you should mention that. I remember when you came to visit me when we went to the Facebook campus, and this guy goes into Facebook security. Was like, "Hey, I forget her name?" But she was like
Oh yeah, Maxine Williams. Yeah, we were looking
yeah,
for Maxine.
yeah. He was like, "Hey, does Maxine Williams work there? I'd like to meet her." Pretty much the Facebook security.
I was just like, I had to try, right?
Yeah. Did you ever meet her, by the way?
We didn't, but that's my silent goal between her and Prime Minister Motley. So I'll be pinging you like within the Bayesian network if there's a way to meet. At least just show her the show, just because she's quite progressive in terms of bringing technology and the Caribbean's future. So
Yeah.
I forgot about that. And what's interesting? I think that's a good story, because when I had visited you in San Francisco, that was like a complete by the whim thing. I went to volunteer for a conference in San Diego, had absolutely nothing to do with anything work related or school. I was in school then. And I just took a chance, and we were like, oh, Kesaan is, let's go meet Kesaan and go see Google. And I was like, why not try to meet the person that I'm trying to target? What the hell could go wrong? I just get a flat nose. So good
One of these
times, man.
days you'll meet her and tell her this interesting story. But yeah, I think the one part of my Caribbean heritage, and I guess Caribbean heritage is different for everyone. But for me, like the fundamentals that my mom instilled, like that drive and passion for education, because like education for her, and I guess it's passed on to me, is a way to get out of like the circumstance you were born into. Like again, wasn't rich, like could never afford to go to college in the States, wherever the case may be, but education gave me the opportunity to get a Barbados scholarship, which in turn allowed me to get to a good college, which in turn allowed me to get into like the Googles and the Amazons and the whatevers of the world. So yeah, just like having that like ferocious drive for education, I think as part of my Caribbean heritage is what has been most impactful.
That was beautiful. So as always, I appreciate the time, and we'll definitely bring you back on the show for an interesting, maybe technical interview. I'll pull you on one of these calls to start interviewing people just for the fun of it.
You know what? We should do one where I give you the same question, because actually I have that list of the questions I asked that when we did that Google recruiting trip, and see if you can solve it now.
Nah, don't do me that. Don't do me that. I want to get fired from a video. But it's good times. Yeah, it's interesting how, at least in my line of work, like the problems that you might work on in an interview are kind of like completely orthogonal to what you have to do at work. But cool, man, cool. Well, it's vibes, and we'll be in touch, man. Later.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. See ya.
Bye.